It's never hitting. It's whispers. It's the sudden silence when you walk in a room. It's the fake smiles and then realizing you've been dropped from the group chat and the really bad vibe you feel that tells you that you're not welcome. Here's the truth no one names. Female bullying. It hides in kindness at first, and then it can turn vicious. If you've ever been targeted with a smear campaign by other women, then you probably noticed, like I did, that it has this weird property that makes no sense. You may never know why a group of women have turned against you, but they can do real damage. In this video, I want to talk about what female bullying looks like, how it happens, what it feels like, and what you can do about it. And I'm going to start by telling you what happened to me. So when my first child was about to be born, his dad and I rented a house at the edge of town on this long cul-de-sac, like half a mile long. And it was near wildland and forest. And as luck would have it, out of 20 or 30 households on this cul-de-sac, 5 of them were about to have their first child, like in the same few months. So I was invited to join a mom's group. And I was happy to be invited. I felt really isolated out there, and I hoped that I would be making new friends and, mom friends. It's like what you're supposed to do. And at first, things were fine. My kid's dad and I got married and had a second kid and still tried to stay involved in the neighborhood. And it was a little awkward, though, because this group loved to drink. And I mean, some of them drank a lot. And any kind of evening gathering, and most of them would just be absolutely shit-faced. And my son's dad was and is a longtime sober alcoholic, so he didn't drink. And out of respect for him, and because I was a mom of young children, I didn't drink either. And if you're a non-drinker, you can get very left out at a party when the wavelength is all about drinking and the people are getting drunk and sloppy. And I think there was a cultural difference there too. They were kind of hippie types who wore babies in slings all the time. And I wasn't in a position to do that because we depended on me working so that we could pay the rent. And so sadly, I couldn't stay home as much as I would have liked. I didn't know why the moms eventually turned on me, but something shifted. It started small, little stuff, people exchanging weird looks when I hung out in the group, then an email thread that I wasn't included on, then I mentioned it, but then they did it again. And there was a rude joke about me. I can't remember what it was, but I felt like I couldn't say anything or they'd accuse me of acting too sensitive. So I ignored it. I acted like, oh yeah, that's funny, haha. And there was a neighborhood potluck with the whole neighborhood where strangely no one would talk to me. And I didn't like it. I asked a couple of people what was going on and everybody ignored my question. And so I left. And then at Halloween, while my little son and I, he was all dressed up in a superhero costume, we were waiting for everyone to gather at our end of the block so we could join the group and go trick-or-treating together. We were all going to do it before it got dark. Well, then it did get dark and they didn't come. Nobody came, no trick-or-treaters, because basically the kids we were getting together with were all the kids within walking distance. So our bowl of candy just sat there by the door. The pumpkin was carved. There was a candle in it. There was nobody to see it. And I got this sick feeling about the whole thing. And I was calling them and no one answered. So I took my son out in this dark road to go knock on a few doors at least. And we rounded a curve. And there they all were, the moms and the dads and the kids, everybody but us, having a party at one of the houses. They were done trick-or-treating. And I asked what happened, and they said, oh, we must have forgotten to tell you the plan, but the fact that they never even came down to our end of the street, that took effort. And they did this on purpose. It was obvious. And of course, my son wanted to stay and play with the other kids at that party. And I felt like I couldn't drag him out of there. It was this really awkward situation. So I had to sit there for a little bit, like a decent interval, with nobody talking to me and pretend like this wasn't happening. And I tell you, I couldn't wait to get out of there. It didn't just hurt me. I didn't know what to do. So I got home, I got my kid to bed, and I did my daily practice. And it did its work on me. And my mind got clear about what I was going to do about it. And, the daily practice, by the way, is is the method I've used for over 30 years to re-regulate my nervous system, clear my mind, get in touch with my intuition and insight. It's a couple of techniques. They're very easy. I teach them to everybody in the world for free. If you want to learn it, there will be a link down below in the second link, the daily practice. You can always get it there. So the next day, I went and knocked on the door to the mom whose kid was my son's favorite friend, thinking she would tell me what's going on. They went to the same preschool, and we used to carpool together to share the job of getting the kids there. And I was really angry and hurt, and I asked her why that had happened last night. And I found out it was her who started it, the smear campaign, and I found out why she did it. The whole thing began about a month before when I had to tell her family, I told her husband, I can't carpool your kid anymore because my car only holds 2 car seats in the back. And now with the new baby, I got 2 kids, so I can't do your kid too. So he said on this one day, he goes, well, this is a total emergency. I need to get him to school. Our car is broken. Could you just help me out today? And I was like, yeah, but I would have to put him in the front seat, which is legal, or was then in any case. It was legal to put a kid in the front seat. They were 3 or 4 years old. It was advised not to. You put the front seat as far back as it goes, So I drove their kid to school, and I drove carefully. I wasn't too freaked out about it. And that was all there was to it. I dropped the kids off at school. So then gradually after that is when I started realizing there was this smear campaign against me. So evidently the mom heard about this and was enraged. And I don't know what her husband told her, but it couldn't have been the truth about the situation where he really asked me to do it and I was reluctant. But in her mind, I had done this terrible thing. I had endangered her kid, and I should have known better. I should not have done it. And so she told everyone in the neighborhood that I was a dangerous person and should not be trusted around children. That is such a serious thing to say about somebody, and it was just totally a lie. So I told her what had happened and that I had not volunteered to do that, but her husband really needed it and asked me, and reluctantly I agreed. And the school was like a mile away on a quiet road, and it was legal. And she said, well, I don't care. You nearly killed my child. And she said that she couldn't even look at me ever again, that what I had done was so terrible. And she was like shaking when she told me. It just made no sense. And I feel like this was some issue between her and her husband. I was not involved in that. I don't know what that was about, but that was it. She recruited every mom on the block and the other neighbors to shun me and not speak to me. And we were never included in neighborhood activity again. And then around that time, my marriage fell apart. So my kid's dad, he moved out. I became a single mom. I was handling all this stuff by myself. And I found out that that's probably a trigger sometimes for people to kind of turn against a single woman, maybe. And then more problems happened, and I had a surgery that I needed, and something went wrong, and it led to 4 years of medical complications. I ended up with 14 major surgeries, 44 trips to the emergency room. I had these constant problems in and out of the hospital. And, my kid's dad would take over when I had to go to the hospital. But in the middle of the night, it wasn't always possible. I was always in this really difficult situation. And none of those neighbors did anything. One of them once made a dinner for me years later, 4 years into it, made a dinner for me. And I talked to them about this, but they were just like holding firm. No, you were a terrible person. You drove that kid. I don't know. It was hopeless, and it went on for a long time. And what happened was 2008, and the housing market collapsed, and my house lost 75% of its value. I was just hanging on, paying the mortgage, and then I couldn't sell it because it was worth less than I owed by a good chunk. And it was 10 years, all in all, that I lived there on that awful street before we could finally move away from those people. And I want you to know that thanks to the daily practice, I was still able to make this period of my life a time of great personal growth. So much of what I teach now, I learned then about re-regulating my nervous system, learning to have better relationships, stopping having negative relationships with men. But one thing I developed then was a set of actions I could take when I was feeling down and depressed that would lift up my spirit. And it's so important, right? So it was 10 years that I lived on that street subject to this female bullying campaign that was just so unfair. But I also want to say that this period of my life ended up being when I did so much inner work and I figured out how to solve a lot of my life problems. I didn't quite yet know what dysregulation was or complex PTSD, which I had, but I was learning how to sort out a lot of the sort of negative decisions that I was making. And I was learning how to keep myself out of problems, which is so important. And I also generated this list of things that I could do to feel happier in the moment. And if you want to see my list of tips to lift your mood right away, I'm going to put that down in the first link down in the description section. You can get through some very hard things if you use these tips. I don't wish it on anybody, this bullying campaign. But if you want to see them, I've summarized them. It's a free download. You can just get it by putting your email in when you click on that down in the description section. I still use this list. I even have made a course out of it that you'll have access to later, but you can have this list for free. It's just like the tips that'll just change your mood right away. So I learned to be happier, but the bullying went on and on. So there was this older single woman on the block who was very sort of socially central to the whole group. And she was very tight with all the moms. And she was running with the Anna is dangerous narrative. And I didn't know that. I mean, she had always been sort of cold to me, but I didn't know how deeply involved she was until it came back to me. Someone told me that she was telling everyone that I was that I was killing cats. She told everybody specifically that I had killed 4 of them. And this is just so fabricated. I had a cat when I lived there. She was a nice cat. She eventually died of old age. And if anything, I should have put her to sleep earlier than I did because I had been through the death of somebody, and I honestly had PTSD pretty bad, and I could not deal with putting my little beloved cat down. And so in her last week or so, she was crying, and maybe the neighbors heard that she was crying. She had pain. Honestly, I feel so bad that I didn't do that, but I didn't kill her. In fact, I didn't kill her, I didn't do that. But then the rumor went around that I killed 4 cats, and she was telling everybody that I was dangerous and you shouldn't let my pets get near me. So I'm telling you, this was the most insane smear campaign. And to this day, it's so confusing to me. Like, what was that? What are they even thinking? Why did they single me out? So after my cat died, I got a kitten, and then she told everybody I was abusing the kitten. Like, nobody would speak to me. And there was this one man, also an alcoholic, a father of teenagers, who lived a couple doors down, who would regularly pee into the backseat of my car. I figured out it was him. He ruined that car. I had to start locking the car because of him. It was a rural place where nobody locked up. It's like people had gone mad. It was like a witch hunt. And though it felt good to confront people, it was like good for my spirit to say, you're wrong about me, there was literally nothing I could do. So I waited for the housing market to recover enough to sell my house. And the 2008 thing really hit hard. And even though I'd made every payment for 11 years on time, I put quite a bit of money in, and I put quite a bit of money into improving the property. It was underwater by a lot. The value had dropped 75%. I owed more than it was worth at that time, and I couldn't sell it without owing a huge amount of money. So even though I had no trouble making payments, it's called a short sale, effectively giving it back to the bank and just getting the hell out of there with nothing to show for it after all that. And honestly, if I had it to do over again, I would have rented it out because the market did bounce back and it went crazy. And today, I didn't want to do this, but I looked, what was that house worth now? And what would be my equity in it? And you know what it was? $1 million that I don't have, that was in that house. But part of me is just like, oh, well, I really needed to get out of there. I had it for so long with that crazy, sick environment and all the drunkenness and drugs, I think, and gossip and unfair treatment, and still never knowing what it was. Like when you have CPTSD, when you're working on how you feel bad about yourself, if people treat you badly and you don't know what it is, in a way, that's worse than knowing the worst thing it could possibly be. because your mind will just play tricks on you, and make you feel bad about yourself. But not me. I rose up. I got engaged. I got married to my now husband. I got out of there. I got a happy marriage. I lived in a happy neighborhood. That is my revenge. But I never understood why they did that to me. So recently, I was playing with ChatGPT, like so many people are, and I was asking it things that are a mystery to me. And one of the things I asked it was, why did the neighborhood do this to me? What would motivate women to behave this way? And it told me something. And I printed it out so I could read it to you. So ChatGPT says, yes, I can explain it. I'm sorry that happened to you. It's cruel and it's common, especially for women who have experienced trauma. I guess it knows me, right? When a group of mothers gangs up on someone like that with rumors, cold shoulders, and smear campaigns, it's often not because of anything you did. It's because of who you are, and more specifically, what you don't do that threatens the status quo. And I don't think I told ChatGPT about how all of them were heavy drinkers and I didn't drink, but I thought that's the first thing that came into my mind. Was it alcohol? So it says, number one, it's telling me possible reasons. You weren't playing the game. A lot of women, especially in those early parenting years, are scared. They're unsure of themselves, trying to find identity and connection. So they form groups, and those groups often run on unspoken rules. Don't be too real. Don't step outside the norm. Don't question what the group values. Stay in your lane. And if you show up calm, independent, honest, or not eager to please, you instantly stand out, and that makes you a mirror. You make others aware of the ways they're faking it or not okay, and instead of dealing with their own discomfort, they project it onto you. Okay, that's possible. It sort of reminds me of the way sometimes people tell you what you want to hear when people have been mean to you. It's like, it's all their fault. It's never your fault. It's because you're great. And so I didn't really believe that, except that I think all of those women were incredibly unhappy. Okay, 2, one person needed you to be the scapegoat. Scapegoats, here we go. In most of these dynamics, it starts with one woman who feels insecure or threatened, often for reasons that have nothing to do with you. But instead of sitting with her discomfort, she makes it your fault. You become the difficult one, the negative one, the weird one. I'll tell you a secret. I am a bit weird, I think, compared, but in a good way, as you know. But this narrative makes her feel more powerful, and then she tests it by gossiping. And if the others are too scared to disagree or too insecure themselves, they fall in line. It feels like loyalty, but it's really fear. You were excluded to keep the group bonded around a shared enemy. Whoa, maybe. 3, you may have had boundaries, and that's not allowed. If you didn't overshare, or if you didn't go along with something that felt wrong, or if you pulled away from someone's invasive energy, that can infuriate people who rely on control to feel okay. Okay, that could be true. In a trauma-affected group, a boundary is perceived as an insult. You may have been cast as judgmental just because you didn't perform approval. Well, all I did was I just didn't drink, and I was actually very gracious. I never criticized other people's drinking. I'm telling you, I thought it was heavy, but that's not what I laid on them. I just was like, oh yeah, no thanks. And so I remember one of the moms asking me why, and I explained what I explained to you. But I have experienced that before, where some people were, maybe if they think they have a problem with alcohol, they'll be like, oh, you think you're better than me, huh? And I don't know. Number 4, trauma invisibility made you an easy target. If you grew up with trauma, you may have been conditioned to disconnect when things go wrong. You might freeze, go quiet. You don't lash back, you retreat. I think we're onto it now. To people with their own unresolved issues, this looks like weakness. And some people, especially those clinging to social dominance, go after the person who won't fight back. It's not fair, it's not okay, but it's how these dynamics often work. Bottom line, this is ChatGPT, says, they didn't gang up on you because you were bad. They did it because you made them feel something they didn't want to feel. And instead of doing their own work, they chose cowardice. They bonded around cruelty, and they picked someone they thought was alone, which I was. Eventually, when I was divorced, I was. And actually, in that marriage, I was pretty alone, too. That wasn't a reflection of your worth. That was a reflection of their fear. And if you want, I can help you write about this. That's okay, ChatGPT. I just thought I'd share it. Wow. So that's the best I've got about why it happened. I think some of you can maybe say something in the comments if you've had it happen to you, to share insight about, like, it happens. It's vicious. It's very damaging. It's not the only time I've had women gang up on me, but this was the worst and most consequential. And it isolated me so much. And it was later, after this episode of bullying, after I stopped having any contact with any of them, I just was like living in my house, getting there by myself, that, stuff got harder for me. That was getting into some of the hardest time of my life. And I got involved with somebody who turned out to be on drugs. And so at that point, perhaps there was gossip you could have had about me. And I'm sure there was, but I'm just not sure I would have been in that vulnerable position if I hadn't been subject to this like strong, awful smear campaign. Most advice about bullying is not to confront the bullies, but I did, and I'm glad I did. I lost my happiness for 10 years and then my house, but I saved my spirit by saying something and standing up for myself. And when I did, they didn't apologize. They never acknowledged what they did, but the bullying stopped. So with that, let me know if this has happened to you in the comments. And if you like this video, I've got one lined up for you right there that I think you'll love. This is how friendships fall apart. This kind of thing is how it falls apart. And it's not your fault you got this way. This is a really common and normal response to having grown up with trauma. But of course, we all want to work on it and learn to handle it even better.